We start this video and picture tour at the 100th Bombardment Group Museum. Formed in 1977, it is probably the oldest of the 8th Air Force museums in the United Kingdom. The first picture is of my 1943 Ford GPW in front of the restored control tower. The tower is the centerpiece of the museum, which is located on the north side of the former airfield. The tower is one of two original buildings surviving on the site. The other is the night flying equipment store, the largest building seen here. Originally it had 3 bays with doors, 2 of which have been bricked up to better use the space inside. A smaller extension was built onto the night flying store to house additional exhibits, and beyond that, a rebuilt 16-feet span Nissan hut, known as the Sad Sack Shack. This hut contains a working, Link navigation trainer. The last building is a 24-feet span Nissan hut, which was another built after the museum group formed. It wasn't part of the original tower complex, but does incorporate a brick-built pyrotechnics store, which can be seen sticking out from the side at the far end. We leave the museum now, driving east, passing the field that held dispersals 8 to 12, and stop at the corner of the wood. This wood contained the battle headquarters. This short clip was taken during the winter of 1995, looking across the dispersals towards the tower. The battle headquarters is at the front edge of this wood, though the wood itself has now expanded from its wartime boundary, now extending to the perimeter track. A little further east around the public road, brings us in line with runway 22. This was one of the shorter, 4,800 feet long secondary runways. A B-17 ran off the runway and crashed here, but more of that shortly. A right turn at the road junction, and a short distance south, brings us to a small access road at the threshold of runway 28. This is the eastern end of the main runway. As the video pans left, we stop, looking back towards the end of the secondary runway. This is where the radar-equipped B-17, Hang the Expense, overran the runway in the early hours of the 19th of May, 1944. The crew were to lead the 100th Bomb Group that day. Arriving in darkness, they struggled to find the outer circle lights, leading to the active runway. Crossing the threshold high, the flying control officer fired 2 red flares. They ignited just ahead of the cockpit, temporarily blinding the pilots, who touched down long on the runway. The B-17 overshot the end of the runway, crashed through the airfield boundary, ripping off the landing gear in the roadside ditch, and coming to rest in the next field. The damage was bad enough to write off the B-17. Continuing to pan left, we see the battle headquarters wood, and then the control tower and museum. That then brings us to looking straight down runway 28, the main runway. On a Class A airfield, the main runway was 6,000 feet long, but unusually, the runway at Thorpe Abbotts was about 300 feet longer than standard. Only a small section of the main runway remains, at the intersection with runway 1735. Panning left again from the main runway, the camera shows many furrows from drainage ditches. I think this was autumn or winter, 1994. The camera stops at a ridge of earth that runs parallel to the 349th Squadron perimeter track. The 349th Squadron aircraft were located on dispersals 13A to 26. This area also included the second technical site, a T-2 hangar, firing butts, and an aviation fuel store. The 349th perimeter is one of 2 full-width stretches of perimeter that survive. Today, it is quite overgrown, but back around 1994, it was pretty clear and in good condition, as seen here, looking south. Moving south along this perimeter track, from the threshold, we reach dispersal 17, which survives today. A small post-war hangar was built on this pan dispersal, around the late 1970s or early 1980s. A Piper Cherokee aircraft operated from the perimeter track, after the runways had been torn up. Another couple of 100 feet south, brings us to the location of the loop, or spectacle hardstandings, numbers 20 to 23. These were torn up to reclaim farmland, but at certain times of the year, they reappear as crop or parch marks in the ground. At the same location to the entry point to these dispersals, was the northern entry track to the T-2 hangar. This concrete track, and the hangar base, survive today, but once again, they are mostly overgrown. A little further south, brings us to the other hangar entry track. Looking on Google Earth, this southern track looks to be the only one still partially exposed. It was much more clear when I visited for these photos. Another couple of 100 feet to the south was Dispersal 27A. The earth bank firing butts were built around this dispersal, for the test firing of machine guns. The dispersal has long gone, but some of the earth bank from the firing butt remains. Moving south once more, the perimeter track stopped short of the threshold of runway 35. This meant I was unable to get a picture down the runway from that location on the ground. In 1997 and 1999, I had 2 flights over the airfield, taking many photos around the airfield and accommodation sites. This aerial view of runway 35 is the only view I have, close to the end of the runway and perimeter track. We now jump westwards, to the northeast, southwest runway, number 04. Much of this runway was removed in the early 1980s. The concrete has been reduced from the original 150 feet wide, to a 15 feet wide track for farm access. Panning left from the runway, you can see an area of the 350th Squadron perimeter track remains at full width. This is about 450 feet long, before it reduces to half the original width. It was at this end of the runway, where there was a 3B-17 pile-up, in bad weather. From memory, it was the end of the landing roll, where in poor visibility, one B-17 collided with another, which was turning off the end of the runway. A third B-17 then hit the wreckage of the other 2. All 3 aircraft were written off. In the background of this image, you can see an original electrical substation, on the edge of the woodland. This woodland contained the main technical site. From the edge of the 350th Squadron perimeter track, we head into the technical site. I'm switching to a close-up map of this site, to make it more clear where we are looking. As we moved from the perimeter, heading east towards the tech site, we pass what was the radar workshops and WT station on the left. Slightly further in, on the right side of the road, was the maintenance unit buildings. At least one of the maintenance site buildings survives as a concrete slab and a few courses of bricks. Just before the first road junction, on the left, is the electrical substation. This is the building that was visible from the runway collision location. It was in fairly good condition in the mid-1990s, but I haven't seen it since. Just beyond the substation, is a junction, where we stop. On the right, there is a road leading through the technical training area. Along this road on the left, were lubricant and flammables stores, the armory and the crew lockers and drying room. There were several different offices along the right side of the road. We now drive further west into the technical site. There are no buildings along this stretch of road until we stop, where there was a blast shelter and several gas defense center buildings, located on the left and right of the road. Driving a few more yards west from the gas buildings, we arrive at the motor transport section. On the left were the MT offices and a 5,000-gallon bulk storage tank for petrol. To the right, was a large 4-bay shed for storage and repairs of vehicles, plus various offices and stores behind. Driving on past the bulk petrol store, next on our left was the salt store. I'm guessing this was bulk road salt for winter icing conditions. Just beyond that, also on the left was the bulk oil compound. Opposite the oil was the coke store where fuel was stored to heat the various buildings. We now drive to the end of the road, and turn right onto the Western Technical Site Road. This road was quite overgrown in the 1990s and now is only accessible on foot. At the far end of this road, on the right, was the T2 hangar and squadron armory. The T2 hangar is long gone, but it would have looked like this surviving example at Rattlesden Airfield. To the left of the hangar, was the station photo lab buildings. In 2015, I wanted to recreate a picture of the station photo jeep at the lab, but had to park the jeep on this corner and walk. I took a photo of the overgrown location from the same position as the wartime picture. Later, I parked the jeep on the perimeter track by the tower, and recreated the jeep part of the picture. Both were then combined to make a copy of the wartime picture. Just south of the hangar, were the main workshops. These buildings were 2 large Romney huts. Close by, on the other side of the road, there were 2 more Romney huts, which were the main stores. Close by were the main store offices, parachute store and dinghy shed. Turning to the left from the parking spot, the area is completely overgrown. During the war, this was the site of the gunnery training blister hangar, and was out in the open. The technical site would, stopped on the right side of the road. This picture shows the area as it was in the 1990s. Google Earth shows the area to be completely woodland now. We started heading south on the tech site road, and almost missed a small detail on the ground. Backing up a little, we stopped at the motor transport petrol installation. This was a 1,000-gallon underground fuel tank, and above ground, a fuel pump. The concrete mounting plinth was still there in the undergrowth. The museum staff said the underground tank was still buried there. About another 40 feet along the road, there was a turn-in to the right. This is now overgrown like the rest of the area. Inside this part of the site was a long brick hut, the Link Navigation Trainer building, and the smaller, but tall building, which was the bombing trainer building. Both are now gone, but as previously shown, the museum has a working Link trainer. This watercolor painting shows what the Link trainer building looked like. Close by, and a little further south, was the fire party house and tender shed. Once again, these buildings are gone and the area overgrown. Another short drive south brings us to the end of the West Side Technical Site Road. Just on the left at the junction was the bomb site store and repair building. This is another building that was demolished. Close by, to the east, is the Speech Broadcast Center, one of the few surviving buildings in the technical site. Each site around the airfield would have loudspeakers, so that important information could be quickly passed around the base. When the wreck of AB-17 crashed on the ammunition dump, the impact started a chain reaction of ammunition and flares igniting. Not knowing if the bomb dump was hit or fires would spread and detonate the bomb dump, an urgent announcement to evacuate the base came over the tannoy, being broadcast from this building. The brickwork was in fairly good condition during my visit, with the exterior blast walls still standing. Inside, there was still paint on the walls and some electrical fittings were still fastened to the wall. Opposite to the bomb site building, on the other side of the road, were offices, marked on the official airfield plans as AMWD offices. I'm guessing this was Air Ministry War Department offices. I was told by the museum staff that this building was used by the Provost Marshal. This no longer survives and is overgrown. Just over the road from the Provost Marshal building was the base utilities buildings. These included stores, plumber's shop and cement store, a carpenter's shop, the fitter's shop and mess, and the works motor transport shed. These have also been demolished and the site is overgrown. We are still right on the edge of the technical site, but are now moving into the admin and headquarters site. We are standing close to the Speech Broadcast Center, looking south towards the site where the interrogation block was located. The aerial photo shows the location of the admin site in the woodland, which at the time wasn't heavily overgrown with trees. The ground picture shows quite an open area, clear of large trees. Since then, the woodland has spread and the area is now quite densely covered. Jumping to the other side of the interrogation block, there is a sign that something was there. Standing up out of the undergrowth, there's a metal fire hydrant sign. Panning left from the hydrant shows it to be on the edge of the northern admin site road. This road runs between the interrogation block and the operations block. As the camera continues to pan left, it is looking at the northern face of what was the operations block. I think the block was demolished in the 1980s. This watercolor gives an impression of what it looked like. This view is from the northwestern corner. On the right side of this impression, there would have been a large Nissan hut. That hut was used as the briefing room. To the south of the operations block were two long Nissan huts. These huts were the station offices. These buildings have also been demolished. In this picture, you can see how overgrown the area is. Looking at the wartime picture, the fan-shaped tree in the background can still be seen in the 1990s image. The car was still parked north of the admin site. So as we ride along here, we follow the left and right bend from the tech site, past the admin site, stopping at the first road into communal site 2. While the site is overgrown, the locations of the roads were still clear in the 1990s. Looking east along the first road, immediately on the left was the base gymnasium. Following the road, next on the left were a latrine block and ration stores. At the far end of this road was the institute. On the other side of the road, there was the dining hall. With this whole site being overgrown and waterlogged, we didn't explore on foot. Driving a little further down the road along the communal site, we stop at what the site plan says is the education block. During our tour, I was told this was the base chapel. Once again, the building has gone and the area overgrown. Close to the chapel was another entrance into the communal site. This road went along the other side of the dining hall, passing a grocery store and shower block on the way. On the right-hand side of this road was the post office, and just behind it, there is a surviving blast shelter, hidden in the undergrowth. Back to the car, and we continue down the main road, passing the post office and fuel compound on our left. We stop at the road junction marking the end of the communal site. Looking northeast up this third road into the communal site, at the end of this road was the sergeant's mess. Once again, the area is overgrown, but less so, in the road area. On the other side of the sergeant's mess, was the officer's mess. To the right, between the two mess buildings, was the commanding officer's quarters. To the south of communal site 2, was the sewage treatment works. While I haven't been to this site on the ground, I have flown over the area. The 3 filtration beds survive and can be clearly seen from the air. As for buildings, I haven't seen them myself, but from pictures taken by other people, a tool shed and a partially collapsed destructor shed survive. We're stopping here for part 1 of the tour. In part 2, we'll take a look at the accommodation sites, the bomb dump and runway 10. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.